Hey, what's going on, guys? Back to you with another video, and I have a very, very special guest. Please help me welcome my wife, my rib, my better half, Mrs. Shir'Lee Thompson. So, today we're just gonna be open and honest, like we usually are. These are conversations we have all the time. So, just want to jump right into it. We gonna act like the camera's not even here. And first, I just want to say you are absolutely gorgeous. I have to flirt with you and tell you that. You are extremely beautiful. Thank you for joining me today. So I think it's important first to just everything we do, before we got married, and I guess we'll talk a little bit about that. I kind of want to go into that journey, but just talk about it and being intentional on purpose, what that means to you, and we can both talk about our journey of being intentional and on purpose. But since that's the lifestyle, I guess just tell me in your own words what that means and how we came to this point.
So intentional and on purpose means for me that every single thing that we do in every area of our life, we are to be intentional. Whether that's being a wife, whether that's being a mother, a friend, a daughter, an employee, to be intentional with our actions, our time, our words, and to do everything on purpose and for purpose, because that's what I believe we were created when God created us. He created us intentionally for a purpose, and He created us on purpose.
Yeah.
So I kind of like to try to maneuver through life like that.
Right. So and I know our story, but can you just bring me back to that point where we first began talking and the Lord gave us that for our marriage? Like, how important was that for you or for us to have a word for our marriage and not just to be together?
Well, again, I guess it goes back to being intentional and on purpose. I don't think we had the words at that time. We didn't have intentional and we didn't have on purpose, but I knew in both of our hearts we wanted to do something in our marriage for a reason, and not to just be attracted to one another and just to be married to say we're married or to fill some type of void. And so the foundation of our marriage was we constantly prayed.
Yeah.
Individually and then collectively when we would be on the phone and different things like that. And we also wrote like little contracts of things that we were not going to do. Like we were not going to kiss, we were not going to connect, we weren't going to do anything.
Yeah.
And we wrote those little contracts down, and then we gave them to a few of our friends.
Yeah.
So they can hold us accountable. They read through it and checked in and made sure that we stayed on that. And even when when we were talking on the phone and things kind of would go, hey, boo, we would we'll bring it back like,
we got it.
How about those Lakers? We would always throw something in there to be like, okay, let's focus. But that's what we were doing. We were being intentional. We wanted the foundation of our relationship to be solid, like that, like the song that we like. When the bones are good, the rest doesn't matter. So we wanted the bones of our marriage to be solid without, fornication, without anything perverted, without anything that we would have to go back and fix again, because we both already did that in the past.
And I don't, to be honest, like when I'm hearing you say that, I don't even remember. Well, I don't think we knew we were being intentional on purpose at first, and then God gave us that word. If that makes sense. Like,
well, yeah,
we were doing it because that was on our heart, and I guess because we've been in so many relationships where we didn't have that. Like for me, I know every relationship I was in, I had sex before that, and I didn't want to do that anymore. And sometimes you get in relationships and you say you don't want to do it, but you slip up
because you don't have any boundaries. You don't have anything to stand on. And I think that's what was so important. Our hearts was there. And like I said at the beginning, we didn't necessarily have the word, let's be intentional. We didn't have the word purpose, but our hearts were, we wanted to do something different. And we wanted the foundation of our marriage to mean something, because whatever you build on is going to determine the outcome of what is being built throughout the years. And so for us, our hearts wanted that before we even met each other, or before we even got reintroduced to each other or whatever. And so once we began to pray, that's when the Lord was like, this is on purpose. And I think either he gave me the word intentional and you the word purpose, or vice versa, or one of it. I don't remember, but I know we both came together and we were like, God, show me intentional. And he was like, God, show me purpose. Like, we're going to be married. We're going to do this intentional purpose. And so that became our whole foundation of our relationship. And then everything that we began to do, you know, whether it's ministry, we have to be intentional. Mm-hmm. How we live outside of church and our family is like, yeah, we still have to be intentional. We have to be intentional with our prayer. We have to be intentional with reading our word. We have to be intentional with, you know what, we got to honor each other in our marriage, even when stuff is frustrating. You know, we have to be intentional in raising kids. We have to be intentional on being faithful. And I think that was just important to us because we've already had everything before.
Right.
And it was just like, that just didn't work out. It didn't work out. And it's, you know, it didn't work out. And it wasn't who we were as people or who we wanted to be in our hearts.
Yeah. And I remember, I think I heard Miles Monroe say something about this when I was thinking about marriage. And he talked about before you can find a perfect mate, you have to be the perfect mate.
Yeah.
And I know for me, coming out of that divorce, you know what I mean, all those years, I was, you know, doing my own thing. I felt entitled, so I was hurt. And I would jump from women to women and want to be in a relationship too fast. And it wasn't until I got to that point where I got intentional with God and said, you know what, God, I have to check myself and stop making excuses.
Absolutely.
And as a man, you have to do that because it's so easy to put the blame on everybody else. But as a man, I had to look inward and say, you know what, I won't be any good in a relationship until I heal myself.
Absolutely.
And I knew I couldn't go into another relationship with all the hurt and pain. So it wasn't until I got on my knees and it wasn't until I honestly prayed to God, I had to cut everybody off and say, God, you know I'm called to be married. You have to send my wife. And when I got real with God, and that was my prayer. It wasn't a long prayer. I didn't have to shuck and buck. I remember I got on my knees by my bed and said, God, I can't do this without you. You got to send my wife. Right. And I got off every dating site and all of that. And I stopped seeking. I said, I'm going to seek you. And then seeking you, I'll find who I need to find. And then that's when you came in the picture. Right. And I remember when you came in the picture, I didn't even have to ask God because I prayed that prayer. Right. If you're praying God to send you something and he sends it to you, you don't question it.
Sure.
So he began to show me, with me being intentional and on purpose with my relationship with him, it was only then I was able to be intentional purpose with you. Mm-hmm. So in pursuing you, there was a purpose.
Absolutely.
And I knew I was called to be a husband. So it wasn't, oh, we're dating, we're going to have fun. It's these are the parameters we're going to set in place because this is where I'm going.
Absolutely.
And I know you corrected me many a times on that, and I thank you for it. But I think as a man, you have things you think you can do, or you have there's certain things you want to think you can do in a relationship, but it's not until you have the right woman to show you that. And there was things that I thought I can do so far as this is what type of man I am, but you begin to show me who I was and who I wasn't, and that was important for me. So when we began to date in court,
it was important. We challenged each other.
Yeah.
Because there were things that we said we wanted to do and things that we said we just don't do. But then when those situations came up, it was like, but I thought you said you didn't do those things. And it was like, because you had an idea of the type of man you wanted to be, but actually implementing that wasn't, and I think too, because you never really got challenged.
Yeah.
You know, and I think a lot of that is a personality thing. I think naturally when people see you, they automatically give you the title of Lamar is humble. Mm-hmm. And I think they associate people who are more agreeable or more like, yeah, okay, you know, whatever, mild mannered. They think they consider that as humility, which that really is not humility at all. Mm-hmm. But people associate that with that. And then when people see me, it's more, oh, well, she's like this, she's rowdy, she got to be in control, she's, you know, and so then it's just like, no, you know, I think they misconstrue our personalities with our hearts.
Right.
You know, because you can have somebody with your personality, your demeanor, and even the way you speak, and be the most arrogant, most cocky, most, you know, whatever. And you can have somebody who's real rowdy and just hyper and always bold. And I'm not really an agreeable person. And I'm not a person of conflict, but I do believe that there's healthy confrontations that need to be had.
Yeah.
And, you know, but I can have the sweetest heart in the world, you know.
Right.
And I think so people were just kind of judging that. And I think when you and I got together, it was more of a, well, you said you didn't do these things, but yet you're still doing them. And it's just like, oh yeah, well, I'm not used to people really telling me about me because they're so used to just seeing me as this guy. So I live off of that. And I think too, honestly, I think too, with you going through so much hurt for so long, having that, what's the word, like that cushion of this person did me wrong.
Right.
This person hurt me. So now every time somebody tells me, Lamar, you're a good man. You really are a good man. You're this or whatever. It was kind of like you fed off of the part where you weren't feeling adequate, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So the part you were being mistreated in and how you were being abused and not respected and different things like that. Then when people came and they were just praising you, it's like, yeah, this is good. But then that deception crept in because then now you're out of that abusive relationship.
Right.
But you've picked up some bad habits along the way, and people don't see those habits, but they just see you on the outside, and it's like, oh, you're such a good man. And then you come in, and then you and I connect, and we become one.
Yeah.
And it's like, I see you from a totally different lens than what everybody else sees you. And it wasn't a, oh yeah, I know you going this. It was more of, but babe, you're not portraying the man that I know you want to be.
Right.
But that's not what I really see, even though you're allowing people to applaud you in that, but that's not really where you are.
And that's good you said that, because to be honest, there was, from the outside looking in, it looked like I was the perfect person, but nobody really saw my heart or my hurt.
Yes.
And nobody took the time to really dig into me. As men, we need to be challenged. As men, we need to be corrected. We need to have real accountability partners. But I think people saw me, being a good husband, being a good father, teacher, counselor from the outside. So it looked like I'm always giving and serving, but nobody saw the inner workings of my heart, and only God saw that. And when you're in a marriage, if your spouse isn't checking you on those areas in a loving way, you can fall victim to feeling like you're perfect and it's everybody else's fault.
Right.
And it's like those moments where God used you to check my inner thoughts in a way. It was like, man, I thought I was living to be this perfect guy. I thought I was this man who was here and here, but in theory I was, but in practice I wasn't. So when my habits didn't add up to what I said I was going to do, or my habits didn't add up to who I said I was, it forced me to change because I was able to see myself. But you did it in such a loving way. That's another way too. You've never told me to change. You've never forced me to change, but you showed me who I was, and then I didn't have anybody to blame but myself. And that's good. So, I mean, that's an important foundation for a marriage, to be able to have a spouse where you can do that for. Because I think, too, another thing for me is I found myself serving so much. And I think you can serve just so people can see you doing work.
Absolutely.
And they praise you for that, but you get lost in that service.
Because you're also trying to fill a void of what you were supposed to be getting at home.
Right.
But you weren't getting at home. So if the church can give it to you, then I'm going to stay in church. Yeah. And that's kind of like, we're hiding behind the things of God instead of resting in God. Yeah. And allowing Him to do those things instead of saying, because I think there's selfish motive, and then I think they're just things that we kind of just fall into, and I think with you, I never really thought you had a selfish motive, but I thought it was like, okay, you kind of get off on this applause that people give you, but baby, like, that's not really who you are. And I think in a marriage, we are each other's, we are a mirror. Yeah. Even though when I look in the mirror, I see me, but I also see the husband that you are to me. I can see whether I've grown. I can see whether I've blossomed. I can see whether I've bloomed, and I can see the amount of prayer that you give me when I'm not around, when nobody's looking. Yeah. So when I look in the mirror, I see Shir'Lee, the woman that God has created, but I also see this. I see this woman that I am becoming because of your faithfulness behind closed doors and your quiet time with you and the Lord. The things that you're saying about me, the things that you're praying over me, but I also see your heart and your faithfulness when I'm not around and when no one's looking, because you can see that in somebody. Spouses know when things ain't right, and I don't know why people say that. Right. Spouses know, because when you are one, when you are truly invested, you feel something ain't right. Yeah. I don't know what it is. I don't know who he is. I don't know who she is, but something. I don't know whether it's too much time here, too much time on this, too much time with this person, something just seems a little off. But when we look in the mirror, when you look in the mirror, you see you, but you also see the man that you have become. And you see that because of the prayers that I pray over you, over the words that I speak over you, how I treat you. And then even when I'm around other people, when men happen to be there and you're not there, how I carry myself and conduct myself as a wife, even when no one's looking or no one may know, you still feel that. And when you look in the mirror, you can see your confidence comes from that as well. We know it comes from the Lord, but it also comes in from your partner being faithful and being honest and being loyal and doing all those things, whether we're together or whether we're apart.
Yeah. And I think that comes down to like our foundation when we said intentional on purpose. I will never forget when we first start talking, we asked questions,
Absolutely.
but we talked about the things of God, but we were consistent in prayer.
Yeah.
I remember I started reading The Power of a Praying Husband and The Power of a Praying Wife before we were married.
Before we got married.
And at first it seemed crazy, but I knew I wanted a wife. So when you came into my life, I already knew. Like I remember I told you, and it was so important for me to let you know my intentions. Yes. I told you I was going to pursue you, court you, date you, and marry you. Yeah. So that way, every day we talk.
And you always said I had a plan because you knew that was something that I heard from my old pastor.
And that's important because I knew I'm in Texas, you're in Ohio.
Yep.
There was no way I was going to go months with talking to you, having you think about, man, I got this guy in Texas, but I don't know what's his intentions. We're talking for months. Where is this going?
Right.
It leads to other men coming in, or it leads to you questioning. No man should be able to leave his woman questioning where he stands at.
That's true.
You know what I mean? If I knew that I'm gonna do that for you, why not be upfront and tell you?
And you did.
Especially with the time frame. I'm like, listen, I'm in Texas, you're in Ohio. I know my plans. I'm not about to let another man come in, but I know what I want because I see your value.
Absolutely.
Like when I prayed that God sent you to me, why am I going to play with it?
Absolutely.
So it's important. It was important for me as a man to let you know I'm talking to you to get to know you because this is going to lead to marriage.
Yeah.
It's not going to lead to us dating forever and me playing games. And that was important to me. And this is where we're at.
Yeah.
But where I was going with that was I'll never forget the moment you prayed for me because that did something for me nobody else has ever done. I mean, I remember driving to work and you would call me things. You would say, you're a prudent man. You're a faithful man. And you were calling things out of me, but you were also speaking things into me. And as a man, that's so important because when you hear your wife pray for you like that, you have no choice but to grow in those areas.
Right.
I couldn't do whatever I wanted knowing that that's how you saw me. And that's what you were praying to become in me. You've awoken that king in me. And every man needs that.
And I think that's what it is. I think we have this ideal of the man or the woman that we want. We see it. And I mean, that's okay. We have that creative aspect in our mind, and I don't think that that's wrong. But I think where we fall is we get those unrealistic expectations, or we don't realize that God has already, if we're called to be married, he's already put that in us. So the man that I'm seeing in my head that I want is really here. It's just like a blank canvas. He will be this man. You have to call that forth.
Yeah.
You have to pray that out. You have to that's what help is. That's part of being that help. And I grabbed a hold of that long time ago. Yeah. And I realized that. And I'm like, the man that I want and desire, that's what I'm going to begin to speak. And you call those things that be not as though they were. And it works in every area. Some areas take a little longer to manifest. Yeah. But it's like, if you have a man who's horrible with money, or a man whose body, he just does not take care of himself, or whatever, you don't go to the man and start nagging, like, why are you so fat? Like, bro, for real, like, dude, I'm gonna need for you to go ahead and do a few of them crunches for me. Yeah. You don't, because he's not gonna receive that way. And I learned a long time ago that Christ is the head of the husband. Spiritually, the husband is the head of the wife in that regard. So if I got a problem with what's going on here, I'm not even gonna go to you. I mean, there are times where I'm like, babe, let's watch your weight. I mean, let's watch what we eat because, high blood pressure, whatever. And then I'm like, you know what? He's not listening. So let me go over his head. And God, I need you to get his attention in this area because it's important for him to begin to live right, to be here, to carry the anointing, to do the things that he needs to do, to help the people he is called to help, to be here for our kids and for each other. And then it's like, well, you know what? Now my husband is healthy. I thank you, God, that I have a husband who begins to desire to eat right, who begins to realize that his body is the temple of the Holy Spirit, who realizes that the purpose and calling of his life plays a part as well with him being healthy. And I just thank you that he makes better decisions when he eats. I ain't got to run and tell you that. Right. I ain't got to be like, babe, I'm praying for you because you know what? I saw that roll. You got that whole roundabout right there. I don't have to do that. because
She's speaking figuratively, not like.
Well, that's why the camera's from like here up, because we both. But we do those things, and we speak that, and we say that because we call that into existence. And I think people don't realize how powerful they are, especially when they're married. You have every single thing in you for that other person. Yeah. And when you have the Lord with you, and you're speaking that, and you're putting that out there, God will honor his word. He has to.
But I just keep hearing that takes work. And I want to stay there a little bit. Like, how did you learn that? And how is it hard to do? Because I think that, we see a lot of couples, and it's easy to go directly to them and tell them what you don't like or what you don't see or complain. But to go above them and to pray about it, God's going to do the work. Like, why is that so important? Or how did you learn that? Or
so I guess I think there's different factors. Mm-hmm. I think sometimes we got a gnat in here.
Right.
I think sometimes people look at us, or they look at certain couples that they admire, and they're like, man, it's like, how do they get that or whatever? I think it's kind of like personalities and gifts and talents. There are some things, like with me, when it comes to forgiveness, I forgive like that. Now, does it mean that, I forgive everybody right away and I don't have to work on that? No, it just means forgiveness for me. It was something that it was already in me. Mm-hmm. So forgiving for me, it just comes a little easier than somebody else. But, serving comes easy for me too, whereas for somebody else it doesn't. But it doesn't mean that I'm better. It just means we all come with different gifts, talents, abilities, and whatever. Some people are more loving than others, but it doesn't mean that they're not loving. It just means this is so natural for them. They can just pretty much do it in their sleep, but they still can improve their love walk. Right. So for me, that was always a desire for me. Even as a little girl, it was instilled into me. Even growing up in the different foster homes that I went through, there was this one family that I had, Bob and Marge Shir'Lee, and they loved the Lord, and she always would instill different things in me, but I'm very visual. And so I would watch the type of woman she was, and I always wanted that. But even as a small girl, that was in my heart, to be married. And I remember I was a young girl, and I never forget, I said, God, whoever you send me to be my husband, I'm going to treat him and honor him like the man that you made him to be. But I didn't really know the weight of that, but I meant it. Yeah. And then, of course, I got into all these bad marriages or whatever with empty promises, and people are like, yeah, we're going to do this. And it's just like, but, oh, no, okay. And it's okay. You live and you learn, and stuff happens, but it was always there. It was always a desire, because I really believe that what you put in, you get out. Yeah. Now, there are certain relationships, there are people, we know people get abused and mistreated, those are different. But for us, it was more about where I went to church, and I learned from some of the greatest men in the world, and they were really real men, old school men of God. And they taught me things about being a young lady. And they taught me things about being a man and what husbands need, whatever, without always directly saying, Shir'Lee, when you get married, it wasn't like that. I saw how they were in character. Yeah. I saw how they interacted with me. I watched how they interacted with other women. And I love that. And so I began to see that they never put themselves in compromising situations. Mm-hmm. They always kept their wives involved in everything that they did. And I would watch that for years and years and years, and they were always consistent. And I listened to their words, and I watched their behavior, and I was like, well, dang, the type of wives they have are not the wives that you see on TV. Yeah. These women, you could pick the best woman in the world that you see on TV. These caliber of women you're never going to see them in the riffraff. You're never going to see them trying to be seen. They're pretty much behind the scenes women who are like holding it down. Yeah. They're not the boss chicks. They're not none of those. They're literally like, God, my husband, my family. And they're selfless. They're completely selfless. And I always said, God, I want to be like that. But that was pretty much already in me. But when I seen that, it was kind of like a connection. Kind of like a kid, like you in basketball. It's like you love basketball. Mm-hmm. When you seen a ball, you just automatically knew. What I mean? It's like you love basketball. So it's kind of the same thing. And so for me, I watched that, and I wanted that. And I just made sure, I'm like, okay, that I love like learning about marriages and stuff like that. and reading different books. But one of my favorite scriptures in the Bible is, whatsoever things we do wholeheartedly unto God and not unto man. And that's what helps me even when you and I, we don't really argue, have a lot of conflict at all. But when we have those, oh my God, moments, I always go back to that. I am married to you as unto the Lord. And as I live for God, and as I do what I'm supposed to do, as I'm reading, as I'm praying, as I'm serving, as I'm worshiping, as I'm cooking or cleaning or whatever it is that I like to do, if I'm doing it with the attitude like, he get on my nerves, like he can cook his own food because I got too much going on and whatever, but it's as unto the Lord. And when I do it for the Lord, you benefit from that.
Yeah.
And then I benefit from that because it keeps my heart right and it keeps me focused. And I remember that. But if it's just like I got a flat out attitude and it's whatever, and it's just like, okay, but you're not doing this as unto the Lord. Is this pleasing to God? You know, like he get on my nerves. He know good and well he was supposed to do that. I done asked him 5 times, rinse the dishes before you put them in the dishwasher. And he still hasn't done it. But it's just like, okay, but you're in this situation now. What are you going to do? How is your attitude going to be? And I think when we're always focused on what is pleasing to God, it helps us, okay, God, this is pleasing to you that I serve my family with a good attitude. Doesn't mean you run over me and take advantage. It just means get this right first. And then I'll take care of that. Because there's been plenty of times where I'm just like, okay, God, I'm doing what you're asking me to do. I'm trying, I'm saying it the right way. And then all of a sudden you'll come out the blue a few days later. It's like, you know what, I've been doing some things. The Lord has been dealing with me about how I've been doing this. And I just want to apologize to you and whatever. And it's just like, that's what we do. You know, that's how it is.
So I appreciate that. I hear you saying like, one, watching other people when you were younger, just watching the way other couples work and function. You can see what type of relationship you want to have and kind of cultivate your own, whether right or wrong. Right. And I think you just said something which
I had some wrongs.
Yeah, we all did. And you can learn from that. Because I was thinking too, like, the amount of time doesn't make the amount of years you've been together doesn't make
never.
Like, and I'm gonna just be 100.
I hate when people say that.
Been married for 6 years. There's so many people who say so and so's been married for 40 plus years. I want what they have.
No,
we've been married for how long?
3.
Going on 3 years. We already know.
But we have about 30 years of marriage between both of us.
Yeah, and it just seems like day one, the amount of time we've invested into each other.
Yes.
It surpassed the amount of years. You can be married for 40 years and not invest in.
We know people who have been married 40 or more years.
Yeah, and know nothing about their spouse.
Know nothing about their spouse.
Don't know how to communicate.
Nothing about God. Cannot. And it's just like when people say newlyweds are happy. Yeah. There are people who are newlyweds who are not happy, just like there are people who have been married for years who are not happy. I hate when people say I've been married for like 30, 40, 50 years, so I know what I'm talking about. No.
Yeah.
I need to know. It takes a lot. I don't just run to people like that. I'm funny about that. I always have been, because I know most people that I know have been married for a long time. And it's like, I'm not, there's not.
Almost like, and this sounds silly, it's almost about the amount of work you can put in. You can go to the gym every day and not see any results if you're not doing it.
Yeah, because some people love to be there. Some people don't like change, so they're going to stay in a marriage because they don't want to start over, even though it sucks. Mm-hmm. Some people don't like people looking at them like, oh my God, what would they say? They want to maintain that image of, oh, we've been married.
Mm-hmm. Or they want to stay for the kids or stay for all the wrong reasons. Or it's just about investing. Like, for real, when we got together, from day one, we invested in each other.
Because we were investing in ourselves before we even brought it to each other.
Yeah.
And that's what it should be. And I am a big believer that sometimes in our marriage, God will use the husband and wife to bring about a certain healing. I do believe that. Mm-hmm. But we should not be toe up from the floor up, raggedy, beat down, busted, and disgusted.
Right.
Trying to get into a marriage because it's like, oh, he going to help me.
What happens is, for real, like, a lot of people expect the other person to complete them. And I'm going to be 100, especially with the men right now. I was really intimidated to approach you at first because of how beautiful you were and because of your spirit. And I promise you, I took a step back and had to check myself and said, God, if I'm not going to add to this woman's life, then allow me not to even approach you. Because if I'm in Texas, you in Ohio, I'm like, I'm not here for games. I'm not here to just have a woman who looks good. I needed a wife who can pray, who can get a hold of God, who's going to be there for me, and who's going to be able to support my kids and our family. That was important to me. And I know how a man can just want to conquer and get with a woman because she look good, and you have no intentions to better her life. Yeah, and I already knew what you went through too.
That's good.
So it wasn't just that me being a good guy wanting to do that. I heard your story. And I know as men, or you get in relationships, you can do more damage than good to somebody.
And that's
so true. I'm like, if I'm not totally healed from my divorce, if I'm not stable, whether it's financially, whether it's spiritually, whether I'm in a good position to be in a relationship, then I knew I wasn't going to waste your time. And I had to look at that to say, you know what? Why am I investing my time in this relationship?
Yep.
Because there's a lot of people who are already toxic by themselves. Then they get into a toxic relationship, and then they wonder why every day we fighting. Yeah. Every day we can't get along. The simplest thing becomes an argument, but then you break up and run right back to that person, and it's an unhealthy attachment.
And we refuse.
It's like, for what?
We refuse. And that was so good. Like, because I remember you did do that, and I like that. And I remember what was one of the first things when we started talking, and I was like, the only way this relationship will get ruined is what? If you touch me. Yeah.
That's why I knew I had to put a ring on it quick.
You know what? No, but I also knew you were a man of integrity because we've known of each other for years ago.
Nah, but back up. The first thing you asked me, I'm sorry, the first thing you said before we even start talking would show me your integrity. What did you tell me about stepping on somebody's toes?
Oh, I said if you're talking to somebody or if somebody thinks that you guys are together or you're giving somebody else your time or whatever, I don't want to step on anybody's toes. That's
the key, especially in this generation, because I swear there's so many people who are in relationships or they're in marriages and they always hit you with that line, well, I'm separated right now. Or I'm going through a divorce. So you're like, okay, cool, I'm going to talk to you. And they already got somebody on the side.
Yeah.
It's like when you told me that, I already knew. I said straight up, you ain't stepping on nobody's toes, nobody's feet, no nothing. Like,
no hands, no arms.
I'm totally committed. And I wasn't looking to talk to 40 different girls either. I wasn't trying to. I wasn't going to play with your life and talk to you and then have possibles on the side.
Yeah.
And so many people, they do that. They're going through a divorce or a breakup, but they want what's in front of them. And then they don't invest in that, and that causes more problems. Yeah. So that showed me your integrity because you said, if there's somebody you're even talking to, I don't want to talk to you. So we made it clear from the get-go.
Yeah.
Like, it's all you, and then we went from there.
Yeah, we did. And then, but what I really liked was because I've known of each other years ago. Mm-hmm. You knew when I used to model. You knew all those. When I was smaller. You knew me before I got cancer, before I got sick, and so we would talk or whatever. And then we finally did a video, and I was like, and I don't really care about much. I am who I am. It is what it is. What you see is what you get. But I had to tell you, I was like, this ain't the same Shir'Lee that you used to see. I ain't that size 2'4" no more. Mm-hmm. I'm 8'10".
Little boys want 2'4". I'm a grown man. Listen.
That's true. I was like, I'm still going through cancer treatments, and I gained a lot of weight because of everything that's going on. And they said it will fall off eventually, but this is what I'm going through. And you was like, and then I told you a lot more about some medical stuff that I was really dealing with. And you was like, nothing's going to keep me from being with you. And so we did a video. And you was like, whatever. Then you came to visit me and you was like, whatever. And I was just like, that's really cool. Like, okay, I like that.
And for me, I've always been a hopeless romantic. So I've always wanted to be that dude to be like, you know what? I'm going to go after what I want. So when you told me that, I'm like, as a grown man, you know what you want. Again, I can't get off of that. If you're with somebody, you want to invest your all in that somebody. And I had to let you know, like, listen, I know maybe other guys looking at you, other people wanting your attention. You're not going to question what Lamar is here for.
Absolutely.
I'm here to treat you like a wife. I'm here to be your husband. I'm here to be your man. I want to pursue you. I remember working 2 jobs, but always made time to talk to you, or made time to text you, or made time to let you know I was here for you. We can go on and on about the things like how I surprised you and pulled up on you.
That's in another episode.
Like, you pursue what you want, you know what I mean? You go after it, and I didn't want to leave any doubt, so that was important, you know, because it's like you got to cultivate that in the beginning. It's almost like that scripture. I don't know the exact scripture, but it talks about how a man saw the treasure in the field, so he went and sold everything he had and bought the field.
Yeah.
And that's what I want. Like, I saw the treasure that was in you, so I was able to put away everything that I had to pursue you because I saw the treasure in you.
You did.
And there's not a lot of people who want to do that. You know what I mean? They want to keep everything and then get this or whatever. And I knew that it was an investment, and we continue to invest in each other.
Every day every month. I mean, I know it's been like a few times we haven't been able to get to it on that exact day, but we have on the date that we actually got married. Mm-hmm. So every month on that specific date, we have a marriage evaluation, and it's just kind of like, listen, are our bones still good?
Yeah.
You know, are you okay? Is there some things that I'm doing that you think I can work on? Is there, and so those are the things that we do every month because we need to. And we started it from the time we got married. Yeah. Because I don't believe in after 5-6 years and then we'll start doing that, because I really believe, I heard a man of God who teaches on marriage, and he's probably somebody I grew up listening to, and I absolutely have so much respect for him. But he said that he was like, in your marriage, you should be progressing. If you're in your Christian walk, you're going from glory to glory. You're supposed to be getting better as you grow in the things of God.
Yeah.
Why are you happy at the beginning of your marriage, and then after 2 or 3 years, you're kind of like, shouldn't you be getting like people really have this thing where it's like, oh, you've been married that long, mm-hmm. You shouldn't be like, y'all. It's like, no. Do you have challenges? Yeah. But listen, here's a kicker. You have challenges when you ain't married. Like that's common sense. It's like, why don't you invest in what you guys can do together than to be trying to I don't know. I guess I just have a hard time with that, because I know marriages who are productive and successful as they've grown. Not, we had a hard 3 or 5 years and we went to counseling this whole time and now we're fine. It's like, you don't have to have that. Yeah, you're going to have things that are coming against you in your marriage, but you're going to have outside forces that are going to come against you, because Satan hates marriages. Yeah. He hates anything any type of institution that God created. The family institution that God created, he hates it. So of course you're going to have issues, but your marriage should not be the issue.
That's what I was going to say.
And that's what, if you're standing guard and you're guarding your heart with all diligence by what you hear, see, say, who you allow to speak into your ear, what you're doing. If you're standing on guard constantly, who is going to come in this marriage and mess it up? And if you're not checking yourself and being honest, like, ooh, I kind of said that in a mean way. Like, dang, I need to work on that, babe. I'm sorry. Yeah. Whatever. Then if you're constantly making that a point instead of, I'm about to be a boss chick, I'm about to up my career, I'm about to go out here and get this money. And it's just like, that's cool, but now your marriage is wide open. You arguing, but it's like, I'll just go to work. I got stuff to do. And then before you know it, that's where those 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, and those things come in that start putting pressure. Because we've had things in our marriage that we haven't even told people, even our pastors yet, or whatever, just because we just haven't had that time. But we face things in our marriage that not one soul in this earth knows about.
Right.
And we still made it because we both cried out to God, and we made it here. It's like, listen, but that's what it's supposed to be. Because at the end of the day, there ain't gonna be a pastor there. At the end of the day, it's not going to be a mentor. Now, you should have counselors. Yeah. You have to have wise counsel. It's wisdom to confide into your man and woman of God, especially if they're true men and women of God, like our pastors are. Yeah. But it's good to have counseling and do all those things. But that should not be a crutch. You should learn how to fight. And if you hit an area where it's new and you've never been, it's like, okay, maybe we'll go and. But it's like, we are going to figure out how to do this. And we've done it. And God has done it with us. And it doesn't mean we don't need them, because we don't know what we'll face later on. But it's more of, I'm not running to somebody else first. I'm married to you. I'm not married to that somebody else. Right. I want God to, because there are times where stuff will go on. And I'm like, God. And the Lord is like, okay, but you're going to keep going around that same mountain with him until you talk to him. Because some people want to use God as a scapegoat. Like, when my wife or my spouse they're doing something I don't like, or they keep hurting me in this area, but they don't like confrontation at all. Mm-hmm. And there's a such thing as healthy confrontation that needs to be had. And it doesn't mean you're arguing and yelling, but it's like, listen, is it okay? We need to talk about some things. So let me know when you're free, because I really want to talk about this. And this is what I do every single time I need to tell you something. I always pray first. and I say, Holy Spirit, give me the words to say, the right words to say to him, because I still want to honor him.
Yeah.
And then I always say, Holy Spirit, prepare his heart to receive what I'm going to tell him so he's not offended. And we've always been able to, maybe not in that second, but within 10 minutes later, or maybe an hour later, or even a few hours later, been able to be like, you know what, I heard what you said. Because we're still human. Some things hurt, but we've been able to be like, nah, we're going to fix this, because we don't want that. We don't want anything to come in between our marriage.
But it's that willingness. Like, the key word, and it's not cliche, intentional and on purpose. When we knew God called us to be intentional on purpose, we have to be intentional and on purpose with our communication. And I'm going to be honest, I like to talk a lot, but sometimes I'd rather sit back, be chill, be quiet. So that forced me out of my comfort zone. That's because true. Even when things are good, you got to talk about your marriage. I think sometimes when there's a problem, you always want to address something, but just being open to say, hey, how are we? What's been on your mind? What's been on your heart? Setting intentional times aside to do that. Because I think when things are good, sometimes you just coast.
And we just did that today.
I'm easy. I'm like real cool at that. Like, oh, things is cool. Bills is paid. My wife's good. We coasting. Yeah. You still should have a check-in. How are you?
That's why we do.
Yeah. So that way, when things are bad and you have a check-in, you're not ready to be like, oh, hey, we got to go to talk. Like, that should be up front and be key. You know what I mean?
And I am a communicator.
Yeah.
And I like to communicate. But we just did that today with our daughter. We were just like, listen, we need some time. We're still married, and it is important. And it's like, she got to go. Mom, can you watch her? Because we got stuff to do.
And it's not even about anybody else, but I think I always have a twofold view. One, I want to talk to you.
You do.
We started our relationship with nothing but communication because I couldn't see you, couldn't take you out to date. So that's how we communicated. We built our relationship on communication.
That's true.
But even, being real, if you don't sit and talk to your spouse, there's somebody else who will listen. So that's what I look at too. I know even if I don't want to, I can have the best intentions. Yes. But if I blow you off enough, you're going to find somebody else to talk to.
Yes. And what I guess I did mean to cut you off because I didn't want to lose this train of thought. No.
Nah, it's cool.
Listen, what's that one thing we say? And I know people say it, and people might be like, we don't say that. That D word. You know how people always say,
oh, divorce.
We don't say divorce.
Divorce is not an option.
No, divorce. But,
yeah, it is.
But divorce is sure enough an option.
Look at the camera and tell me.
But this is the first person I've ever met who believed how I believed when it came to this. Because I was like, I always struggled with it when I heard it in church. And I know what they're talking about. I get it. I understand it. But we always said, when divorce is an option, you fight to not take that option.
Because how many people?
We don't want that option.
How many people are divorced right now who said divorce wasn't an option?
I'm one of them.
Real talk, you be like, divorce is not an option. We don't say that D word.
And then you never change. You never fix what the issue is.
You gotta be real. You
gotta be real.
When you realize divorce is an option,
and what divorce is,
every day. You don't choose it.
You don't.
Every day there's a choice to be divorced.
It's easy to want to be divorced. It's the way out. Because it sounds so
cliche. Oh, divorce ain't an option.
And then with us, like, let's be honest. We grew up in church, and we went to different churches, so nobody knows who this is about because they pretty much all said the same thing. But they always threw that out there. You know, a divorce is an option, but nobody taught on what's a covenant, the marriage. You know, what does that entail? What does divorce entail? What does that feel like? What does it look like? What does that mean spiritually? What does that mean? That nobody talked about that. It's just divorce is an option. So, we like little religious beings. We walking around like, I'm going to get me a man because divorce ain't no option or whatever. And it's just like, it's kind of scary because if you come from a place where all they say is divorce is not an option and you're like, well, I want to be in church and I want to learn stuff, but you got somebody over there busting your head wide open, but divorce is not an option. It's like, well, there has to be some type of teaching. And we're grateful that our church is the way they are. It is a marriage church, where they teach on that. But we're in our 40s. That's different. We're talking about when we were young, we were learning all these other ways. And, people are like, divorce is not an option. So you just say it because you have that much faith in your man and woman of God. But you don't understand what the word says about marriage. We don't understand what God means when he talks about marriage. We just think it's a man and woman, they meet. And because God made marriage, they should make it work. It's like, it should automatically work. It's like, no, marriage is a great work. Marriage is great, but it takes work. But it's not a scary thing. Life takes work. Doing my hair takes work. Yes, it's a different type of work, but you got to be willing to put the energy into it. And for us, we always had that energy since we were young.
Yeah.
So it's just like, that was always our focus. Like,
and it seems like
you want to be married.
When you invest in something and do it enough, it seems like it comes easy. I've always had that in me. You've always had it in you. So when we click,
collaborated.
Yeah, when we like clicked and came together, it just brought what was in us out. But we still got to work on it.
But we still
That's
have to
another
work
thing.
on
Like, you think you got two people who are cool, who get along, who love God. There's still work involved. You know what I mean? And I always I love them sports cliches, but it's almost like you think about Jordan or LeBron. They still had a coach and they still went to practice.
And they were still they're great, but they still got to practice.
But here's the thing. They worked on the fundamentals. All their life, they learned fundamentals from elementary, middle school, high school, AAU, whatever.
And they perfected what they already had.
Yeah, when they got to the league, they perfected the fundamentals. Then they were able to add other stuff to their game.
Absolutely.
People don't want to perfect the fundamentals, and they just want to add this to their bag or add this to that, or want to automatically attract a perfect mate. Yeah. But the fundamentals got to be in them first.
Yeah,
and that's what happens in those relationships. They want relationship goals without having relationship goals within themselves.
Without putting in the work to even get to that.
Yeah.
But we don't have a choice because it's what we are. So we're not pro-divorce. We're not that. But what we're saying is, for us, we had a real big talk, and we were just like, listen, I don't agree. Oh, thank you kindly. I know what people say, but I'm not a type of person that's just gonna go around and agree with. Again, I'm not an agreeable person. I want to search it out. I want to understand it, and I want to be true to myself and what God has put in my heart. And so for me, I hear what people say, divorce is not an option, and that's cool and that's cute, and I get what they mean. But that's not what we say. We realize that divorce, and we've been divorced.
Yeah.
We realize that divorce is an option, and so because we realize that, we don't want to take that option. So we do what we can to stay married.
And when you realize divorce is an option, you do things personally different for your spouse.
That's true.
So that way, you know what I mean?
That's
because
true.
when you realize divorce is an option, for me, and this is a whole nother segment, you realize what you do and don't do as a man or as a husband when you're by yourself. So that way, when you're with your spouse, and that's what catches people up too. Yeah. You got to learn how to act by yourself.
I'm still married, even when it's just me here by myself.
Right.
I'm still married when I'm at work and there's other men around.
Right.
I'm still married when I'm out by myself or driving or at the mall, whatever. I don't automatically become single because my husband is at home.
Right.
So if I'm not laughing and giggling up in nobody's face when my husband is here, I sure enough shouldn't be doing it when he's not.
And that's intentional on purpose.
That's being intentional on purpose.
Who are you when nobody else is looking?
That's the character.
Who are
and
you
integrity.
when you're with God? So then when you're with your spouse, the same things. I never forget when you told me, like when we were out somewhere and I had the swivel problem with looking at women being real, and you told me,
rubbernecking.
What do you do when I'm not with you? You know what I mean? When I'm alone. If I'm looking when I'm by myself, of course I'm going to look with you because that's the habits I've created.
Because you created the habit.
But you need somebody to tell you that. You need a good woman to be able to hold you accountable. And I had to see that for myself. But it's just like realizing that, like, you know what I mean? Those habits can cause you to be divorced or has problems in you. Can. So you got to it goes back to those conversations and seeing yourself.
And breaking those old cycles. And realizing, too, that just because something is being brought up doesn't mean that person's trying to quit on you.
Yeah.
Because, you was trying to hide and when some other things came up and trying to run. And I'm like, listen, I just want you to know that whatever you're struggling with, I'm struggling with it too because we're one. Yeah. I don't look at us like we're two different people. If that's your struggle, then you're my husband. We're one. Let's fix this together, bro. Like let's get it worked out because pretty much when you're doing something by yourself that's inappropriate, and let's say I do, basically we're giving other people permission to tamper with our spouses. It's like it's like molesting. It's like I'm gonna sit over here and look at these and I'm gonna lust after, because the only reason why you want to look is because you still have a lust problem.
Yeah.
If you know you don't have a lust problem, I know, like I said, those men that I grew up around and that I watched, I'm telling you, everybody walked by and they were like this. They made it a point. They trained themselves to walk like this. They never looked, they never sweat, and I've always watched them in church, out of church, when they didn't even know they was at the store and I was there. They always stayed consistent, and this was for years. And I always knew that they were men like that, because, if we're created in the image of God, we can't always use that excuse like, well, that's just what women do. It's like, no, we have the greater one on the inside of us. More women may be accustomed to manipulation and control, but we don't have to do that. More men may be accustomed to look at other women or whatever, but you don't have to do that. You choose the type of person you want to become, and then you choose how you want to respect your spouse. And my thing is, as long as you're honest with it, we can move forward.
Yeah. And that's, to be honest, and we can go on and on about this, but for me, the problem was I knew what type of man I wanted to be, but I didn't have examples. So what I was dealing with was that duality of trying to live like a man of God,
were telling yourself,
but dealing with that and not having somebody show me. It's hard when you want to live right, but you don't have any godly man to show you, and you have to learn it from yourself.
You're like the forerunner.
You don't have it. Your spouse is not there to help you, so you feel like you're on an island on your own. So in my mind, I was this what word am I trying to say? I was this prudent man and this man of integrity, but my actions wasn't lining up, especially behind closed doors. But what I showed everybody was I'm this man of integrity, but my heart was dealing with this battle, and I didn't have anybody checking me on that. So then when I got married to you and you begin to check me in those areas, it was new. So I'm ready to run, or I'm ready to fight or argue, because to me, it's like, how dare you tell me?
And you've never had nobody challenge you.
How you gonna tell me I'm messed up and everybody else think I'm perfect? And I started to believe it. So then you're showing me who I am, and I'm afraid because I'm like, this is who I'm trying to be.
Because I've been carrying this perfect torch.
I'm trying to be here, but I'm not, and you're showing me that I'm not.
It hurts.
So now it's a problem, and I got to deal with it. But
remember,
the sad part was you loved me through it.
Absolutely.
And as men, we don't know how to do it. And that's what I was thinking. It's like, I think that's why so many people are in toxic relationships or in relationships that are always having issues, because it takes work to really be at peace and be happy.
It takes work to be at peace. It takes work to stay in peace.
Yeah.
But you know what was so funny about that? Because we stay laughing at everything. Even when we mess up, we be weak. But what was so funny was, I'll never forget, I was sitting on the couch and we was going through all that, and you started coming in like, I rebuke that spirit. I bind it up. And I'm sitting there, and I was so like, this ain't got nothing to do with a demon. This is you.
We're going to edit this out too. We're going to edit this.
No, like, because you wanted to be so like, that's not you. That's not my wife talk. That's a demon. And I'm just sitting there like, okay, when you're done, like this, there's nothing to pray about at this moment. Now it's just take accountability. And I didn't want you to run. I wanted you to stay there, because I'm like, why are you going to, if we're one, where can you go?
Yeah.
You know, where can you go? Like, I want to help you. It doesn't not that it didn't bother me, but I think the interesting thing about that was God was showing me all this stuff that you were doing. And it was like he had one hand on my heart and he had one hand on my eyes. And what he did, I can never forget, because I was sitting in a recliner. What he did was he went like this. He let me see, but then he literally kept my heart. Like, I don't know how to explain it, but he allowed me to see, but he kept that, you know how you get that little prick, that little anger in your heart? It was like, I felt it for a second, but it was like he covered it up. It was like, no, because I want you to love him through. I'm going to show you what it's like to love somebody through this. And I'm going to show him what it's like to be loved through it. But in return, both of y'all get to see how you are with me daily. And that's what God does. What he sees, he knows what we do.
Yeah.
And it does prick his heart. But he loves us so much. He loves us through that. And he wanted to show me that with you. And he also wanted to show, now this is what I do for you, Shir'Lee. This is what I've done for you and all your mistakes. I see them, but I'm going to guard my heart and as you repent, you know, I throw them in the sea of forgetfulness for my sake, you know, for his sake. He remembers them no more.
Yeah.
And so that's what he was doing with me. And that was the first time that I ever really had that experience where it was like, because I've always wanted to walk through things with certain people, but those people, they were different. You know, I'm not mad at any of my exes, but they were just, it just wasn't for them. And so with you, I mean, I'm just like, babe, I'm not mad. Let's do this together, so that way when God elevates us, we won't be like some of these pastors and ministers out here who have these secret lies that catch up with them. You know, we are really in, you know, walking in integrity. Now, do we have a past? Show me somebody who don't. Yeah. Of course we have a past. We was hot, boiling, bubbling messes. But who we are today and who we've been for years is totally different than, you know, I mean, we're not the same people anymore.
And that's where growth comes in at. I mean, even when you're in church, you read the scriptures, but when you're required to live it, because it says, husbands, love your wife as Christ loved the church and gave himself for her. And even in those moments, that's where we should go to the Holy Spirit more. Because when we have those issues and problems, he'll teach us how to love one another.
Absolutely.
And that's when we come and cry and when we're able to pour out.
Yes.
Because that's the only time I can honestly say I was able to be free. I really feared losing you, and I had nobody to blame but myself. And that was the first time I literally looked in the mirror and said, Lamar, you're the problem. Your past marriage, you blamed her for everything.
Yes.
You blamed her for the divorce. Who's in this marriage? And that was the first time I had to look at myself and say, there's some habits that I need to break. There's some things in my heart that I've never got healed. Yeah. Lamar is not the perfect person that everybody paints him out to be. And you told me that. You said the wife is the closest person to me. So the Lamar everybody else gets is not who you get. You see the good, the bad, and the ugly. And that's why it's important to have the right spouse there with you. And when you start loving me through those issues, that's when I begin to break and really begin to get healed.